Mackinder is worried about the loss of British power, and he ends up thinking that there's going to be this sort of grand struggle between land powers and sea powers,
Hmm.
and he gets very interested in the interior of Eurasia, which he calls the heartland. And then he has this famous dictum, he who controls East Europe controls the heartland. He who controls the heartland controls, the world. I may be missing a term in there, but it's basically
That's
that.
yeah, that's right.
And that's fear. He's speaking out of fear, right? He's like, Britain is not well positioned to do any of those things. And interestingly, the Nazis, and by the Nazis I mean like Adolf Hitler personally, get very interested in this kind of thinking and take it not as a warning, but take it as advice. They're like, oh, he who controls Eastern Europe controls the heartland. You controls the heartland controls the world.
There we
That
go.
sounds like a plan.
Yeah, baby.
Indeed, it is a plan. I want to pause and just talk about something else you said, because you said this is kind of a mind palace for reactionaries, and that's true not just because of the genealogical connection between imperialism and Nazism.
Hmm.
It is true for another reason, and it's actually really clarified by the distinction with Marxism. Because if you think about what Marxism is, Marxism, in the kind of most simplistic way, says that class struggle is what drives history,
Yeah.
and that's a conflictual kind of understanding that privileges, insurgents from below, right? That they are the form of the class struggle.
Hmm.
Um, Geopolitics, in its most reductionist form, says that the map determines history, and the map is unchanging. So in some ways, it becomes an apology for power or for the existing arrangements. And in fact, a lot of the geopolitical wisdom that we're seeing in these bestseller books is of the kind of just saying, the United States was fated to lead, or there will always be trouble in this part of China. It's that kind of a thing.
Yeah, it's kind of appealing to I don't know what you would call it, like a conservative impulse. Like it's an advice to princes
Yeah.
idiom. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not just an advice to princes, an advice to princes that does not imagine that much is going to change. So really, the advice is about how to hold position,
Yeah.
and it tends to work better as advice to powerful princes.
Yeah. Status quo bias for princes or something. Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, that's right.
You'd think that a worldview obsessed with geography would take seriously environmental degradation, but the
Yeah, yeah.
geopoliticians say like very little about the climate crisis. Why do you? What is that about?
It's so bizarre. I read,
Huge blind
10 of
spot.
these books like back to back, and it's really, I mean, it's not that no one ever mentions climate change, but it really is remarkable, the absence of that in a lot of these books. And it's strange because I think that a normal take would be, we are absolutely shaped by our environment, and that is why global warming is such a threat.
Yes.
But that's not what you get from geopolitics. You get, we are absolutely shaped by our environment. Our environment is unchanging, therefore our social structures are unchanging.
And there, when you did the Mackinder quote at the top about Eurasian heartland and like he who
Yeah,
controls that 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 exact template of a sentence gets used all the time to talk about modern foreign policy, modern international relations. Like I can't tell you the number of constructs where I've heard like if Vietnam goes, then the entire Asian map goes. If
yeah, yeah,
Taiwan
yeah,
goes
yeah,
down, we lose Japan
yeah.
too. That's the current one, right? And it's like it's always like if this key is unlocked, then everything goes to shit.
Yeah, and it's so often the way that's expressed, and this is from Mackinder, is that these places are pivots, the pivot of world history,
Your
the
quotes.
pivot of.
Can I quote that real quick?
Yeah,
I
sure.
pulled that out. You in the essay you say, "quote Will Turkey become the pivot point for Europe, Asia, and Africa, as Stratfor founder George Friedman contends? Or perhaps India will become the global pivot state, as Kaplan believes, adding that Iran is the most pivotal geography of the Middle East, Taiwan is pivotal to maritime Asia, and North Korea is the true pivot of East Asia." It was a terrific paragraph.
Well, it's really the pivot of that whole paragraph.
Yeah.
So. Look, let's unpack that a little bit. So, I mean, first of all, just counting up the usage of the word pivot in these writings. I mean, it gets comical at a certain point, but yeah, it does. So, first of all, it kind of it speaks to a sort of connoisseurship that geopoliticians are peddling,
Mm-hmm.
where they're like, okay, like you look at a map and you just think these are a bunch of places, but I actually see that this one place turns out to be the key to the whole thing. And
Connoisseurship
then
is a good word.
often,
Yeah.
and then often it's either a key because it has to be controlled, like currently it cannot, the status quo has to be maintained there, otherwise chaos will ensue. Or that this is like how you seize world powers, you seize this one place, he controls East Europe, whatever. And that's an interesting way to think about the world, right? Is to think about like what are the places that if you control them, you get the whole thing. But I think that's very much how Mackinder writes, and interestingly, that's a part that we're seeing a lot of from modern geopoliticians.
Yeah, there's something inherently. This is where the grift part comes in a little bit. There's multiple dimensions to that claim, but a little bit is like it's inherently seductive and appealing to people who have to manage policy and manage risk to
Yeah.
say, here's a point of leverage. Here's a point. We're constant, like policymakers are always looking for points of leverage,
Yes.
like where's the disproportionate bang for the buck? And like,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's what they're claiming, even though it's, I mean, not correct.
How it feels like if you look at the footnotes for these geopolitics books, they're very thinly sourced, and they don't like. There's a lot of like, I know, the Arabian Peninsula better than you can because I've like walked the sands, but like no one speaks any foreign languages.
Yeah.
And in some ways that's the virtue of the claim, is that you can just like from a distance, as long as you have the map, you can unlock everything.
Yeah.
Which is of course that what the hegemon wants to feel, right? Is that the world is a knowable, easily knowable place,
Yes.
so that you can go do business in every place on the planet. I'm just skeptical about whether that's true or not.